It's late, the room is quiet, your phone screen glows faintly in the dark. You reach for comfort. Not because you're craving pleasure, but because you're craving peace. And maybe, deep down, you already sense it that this moment says more about your mind than your body. We often think of masturbation as something physical, an act of desire, impulse, or habit. But what if it's actually a mirror? What if it reflects not your lust, but your loneliness, not your fantasy, but your fatigue? Every habit we repeat in silence, especially the ones we hide from the world, is a language our mind uses to express what our words cannot. The truth is, most people don't even realize how much their habits reveal about their emotional state. You can tell a lot about someone by the way they seek comfort. Some people talk, some people eat, some scroll endlessly, and some reach for themselves. Not because they're chasing ecstasy, but because they're running from emptiness. It's not shameful, it's human. It's the body's way of saying, I need to feel something that reminds me I'm alive. The problem isn't the act. It's the absence of awareness behind it. Psychologists call this displacement behavior, when we redirect emotional tension into repetitive or soothing acts. And here's the interesting part, the body releases dopamine, whether it's from achievement, love, or escape. The brain doesn't judge the source. It just remembers the relief. So, when you reach for that moment of pleasure, you might not be looking for stimulation at all. You might be trying to regulate anxiety, to calm the storm inside. But here's the danger, when relief becomes routine, we start mistaking numbness for peace. We start confusing distraction for healing. Have you ever noticed that sometimes, after it's over, you feel a wave of guilt or emptiness, even if no one knows what you did? That quiet discomfort isn't proof that you're broken. It's a signal that your body and your emotions are speaking different languages. One is saying, I'm relieved. The other is whispering, I'm still alone. Most people try to silence that whisper by repeating the act. But what if, instead of trying to quiet it, you actually listen to it? Every habit has a story. Some begin in curiosity, others in loneliness, others in pain. For some, it became a coping mechanism long before they even realized what it meant. I remember a friend, let's call him Sam, who once told me he couldn't go a day without it. Not because he was addicted to the act itself, but because it was the only time he felt in control. His habit wasn't about pleasure, it was about power. The moment he understood that, everything changed. He didn't need to stop to heal. He needed to understand why he started. So before we go any further, I want you to ask yourself a question, not with judgment, but with curiosity. What are you actually seeking in that moment? Is it connection, escape, or maybe just silence in the noise of your mind? The answer might surprise you, because it's never just about what you do. It's about what you feel when you do it. Maybe this isn't about your sexuality at all. Maybe it's about your solitude. Maybe it's not about lust, but about longing. And if you're brave enough to look closer, to listen deeper, you might discover that this habit you've been hiding from yourself has been trying to show you who you are all along. The next time that quiet moment comes, don't rush past it. Just pause. Because in that pause lies the truth. It's not about control, it's about understanding. And the moment you begin to understand yourself, that's when real healing begins. Every behavior we repeat, especially in private, carries meaning. It's not random. It's not just habit. It's communication. Your actions, even the ones no one sees, are your mind's way of saying, this is how I cope. This is how I comfort myself. This is where I hide. And the act we're talking about today. It's one of the most misunderstood. People either joke about it or judge it, but very few actually understand it. What if, instead of asking whether it's right or wrong, we asked what it's revealing? Because the truth is, it's not just about what you're doing. It's about what you're trying to feel. Think about it. Every time you reach for something that brings pleasure or escape, there's a story underneath that moment. Maybe it's stress after a long day. Maybe it's loneliness that creeps in when the lights go out. Maybe it's the need to feel connected, even if only for a few seconds, to your own body. You see, the body doesn't lie. It knows when you're seeking comfort, even if your mind pretends it's just routine. And that's why this conversation matters. Because when you begin to understand what drives your desires, you begin to understand yourself. I remember Sam, the friend I mentioned earlier. When we first talked, he said something that stayed with me. He said, I don't even enjoy it anymore. I just do it because it's the only thing that makes me feel calm. That sentence says everything. It wasn't about joy. It was about relief. And there's a big difference between those two. Relief comes when you're running from something. Joy comes when you're running towards something. One numbs the noise, the other nourishes the soul. Psychologists often describe this as emotional displacement. When we redirect feelings we don't know how to process into actions that temporarily make us feel better. But here's the catch: what the mind can't resolve, the body will repeat. Until you face what's underneath, the habit becomes the messenger, and the message will keep getting louder until you finally listen. Now, some people think awareness means shame, but awareness isn't punishment. It's power. When you become aware, you stop living reactively. You stop letting the subconscious run the show. You stop giving your emotions the steering wheel. And instead, you begin to see your actions for what they are. Reflections of unmet needs. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. If you've ever felt that quiet guilt after it's over, I want you to know something. That feeling isn't wrong. It's simply information. It's your inner voice saying, hey, I'm trying to tell you something. And if you listen closely, you might hear the truth it's whispering, that maybe you're not looking for pleasure. Maybe you're looking for peace. Here's what most people never realize. The things we do in secret are often the most honest expressions of our emotions. Not because we're hiding, but because we finally let the mask drop. The real question is, what emotion shows up when the mask comes off? Is it sadness? Boredom? Fear? The act itself isn't the problem. The lack of emotional honesty is. So tonight, when the world gets quiet again, and that familiar urge appears, before reacting, just ask yourself one question. What is my heart trying to say through my body right now? Because the moment you begin to ask that question, you stop living in impulse and start living in awareness. And awareness, that's where every transformation begins. Every habit carries a hidden intention. We think we act out of desire, but most of the time we act out of emotion. The frequency of your habit, the timing, even the thoughts that lead to it. They're all emotional fingerprints. They reveal what's happening beneath the surface. Some people turn to this habit when they're lonely, others when they're stressed or restless. It's not about lust. It's about regulation. The body becomes a tool to manage emotions the mind doesn't know how to name. And that's where the real story begins. Not in the act itself, but in the why behind it. Our brains are wired for relief. When stress rises, dopamine becomes the quick fix. It's the same neurochemical pattern that drives almost every human addiction. Not because we crave the high, but because we crave the pause that follows it. The silence after tension. That brief moment where you feel okay again. But here's the catch: the more often you rely on that shortcut, the more your brain starts to associate pleasure with escape. Instead of connection. You're not addicted to the act. You're addicted to the absence of discomfort. Sam once told me that after a tough day at work, he would convince himself that a quick release would help him unwind. It's just stress relief, he'd say. But when we talked deeper, it wasn't really about stress. It was about emptiness. It was about coming home to an apartment that was too quiet. About scrolling through social media and seeing everyone else laughing, dating, living, while he felt invisible. That's when he realized the habit wasn't filling a physical need. It was filling an emotional gap. And the moment he saw that, everything began to shift. Because when you name your pattern, you take back your power. Here's something to think about. Most people don't overindulge in pleasure because they're too lustful. They do it because they're too lonely. Because somewhere along the way, they began to confuse connection with stimulation. But connection is presence. It's being with yourself, not distracting yourself from yourself. That's the paradox. The very act that begins as self-soothing can slowly become self-separation. The more you use it to escape, the less you feel connected to who you are. Psychology has a term for this: emotional avoidance. It's when you use external behaviors to sidestep internal discomfort. But what we resist emotionally always persists energetically. When you push pain away, it doesn't disappear. It just changes form. It turns into impulse, into habits, into cycles you can't explain. That's why awareness isn't just powerful. It's liberating. Because awareness interrupts the loop. It teaches you to notice the emotion before the action. To pause and ask, what am I trying not to feel right now? You see, your emotions don't need to be controlled. They need to be understood. The goal isn't to stop the behavior out of guilt, but to soften into curiosity. Because once you begin to understand your pattern, you stop fearing it. You stop fighting yourself. And that's when healing quietly begins. Not when you suppress the habit, but when you listen to what it's been trying to tell you all along. The next time you find yourself reaching for comfort, remember this: every impulse is an invitation to feel what you've been avoiding. To meet yourself, not as someone who needs to be fixed, but as someone who's finally ready to be understood. Behind every search for pleasure lies a story of pain. Most of us don't even realize that the same hand that reaches for release is often reaching for relief. We think we're chasing desire, but we're really chasing distraction. A moment where the noise stops, the pressure fades, and life feels lighter. But have you noticed how quickly that relief disappears? How the stillness you're seeking never really stays? That's because when pleasure is used to numb pain, it can never fully satisfy. It's like drinking salt water. It soothes for a second, but leaves you thirstier than before. This is where the body and the mind begin to pull in opposite directions. The body finds release, but the heart still feels restless, because physical satisfaction can't fix emotional emptiness. The mind craves connection, not just stimulation. It wants to be seen, felt, understood. But when we confuse temporary relief with lasting peace, we begin to lose sight of what we're truly longing for. We start to believe that our pleasure defines us, when in truth, it only mirrors what we've been running from. Sam told me that after every time he'd given to the impulse, There was a moment of silence that followed. Not peace, but hollowness. He'd lie there and think, why do I feel worse after something that's supposed to make me feel better? That's the paradox of unexamined pleasure. The more we chase it, the further we drift from the fulfillment we're craving. Because pleasure without purpose always leaves you empty. Psychologists often talk about the dopamine crash, that drop in mood that comes after a surge of stimulation. But beneath that chemistry is something deeper, emotional contrast. Your mind returns to its baseline, but your heart is reminded of what's still missing. You're left with the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same void. Only now, you're a little more tired and a little more detached. That's why awareness is so important. Because without it, we start building habits that feed our bodies but starve our souls. It's easy to think the answer is to stop, to repress, to force discipline. But control without compassion only deepens the wound. The goal isn't to silence your desire. It's to understand what it's trying to say. Because even desire, when you really look at it, is just energy. Energy searching for connection, for creation, for expression. The problem begins when that energy has nowhere to go, when it isn't expressed through love, creativity, or intimacy. It turns inward. It becomes a substitute for presence. You are not weak because you seek comfort. You are human. Every human being wants to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel soothed. The issue isn't the craving. It's the conditioning. We've been taught to chase stimulation instead of connection, to feed impulses instead of emotions. But once you begin to notice the difference, when you start to see your desire as a teacher instead of a threat, everything changes. So the next time you find yourself reaching for that familiar escape, pause for a second. Ask yourself, what pain am I trying to silence right now? Because the moment you ask that, the act loses its power over you. You stop being driven by it and start learning from it. And maybe that's where real growth begins. Not in the pleasure you seek, but in the pain you're finally willing to understand. Awareness is the beginning of healing. Once you recognize that your habits aren't random but reflective, you reclaim something powerful, choice. You no longer act out of autopilot, you begin to act out of intention. And that's when everything starts to shift. Because the goal isn't to eliminate desire, it's to evolve your relationship with it. When you stop treating your body as a battlefield and start treating it as a messenger, you begin to see how every impulse is guiding you toward something deeper. Toward connection, toward healing, toward peace. I remember when Sam reached this point. For the first time, he didn't fight his urges. He simply paused. He told me, I realized I wasn't craving pleasure. I was craving presence. That single insight changed everything. The pattern that once felt compulsive began to feel conscious. Because awareness gives you space between feeling and reacting. It's in that space that healing happens. There's a simple practice I often share. I call it the awareness loop. It's a way to shift from compulsion to consciousness. Step 1, a pause. Before or after the act, take 10 seconds to ask, what emotion am I soothing right now? Step 2, name it. Write down one word: lonely, anxious, stressed, tired. Don't overthink it. Just name it. Because naming an emotion reduces its power. And step 3, redirect. Ask, how else can I meet this need? Maybe it's journaling, walking, meditating, or calling a friend. You're not replacing the habit out of guilt. You're expanding your options out of self-respect. This isn't about control. Control without compassion becomes repression. What we need is connection. Connection to self, to body, to emotion. When you meet your urges with curiosity instead of criticism, they lose their hold on you. Because curiosity transforms shame into insight. It turns resistance into understanding. And that's the key: awareness without judgment. From a psychological standpoint, habits thrive in secrecy. They grow stronger when we hide them in guilt and silence. But when you bring them into light, when you talk about them, write about them, understand them, they begin to dissolve. Not because you forced change, but because you replaced avoidance with attention. Every time you pause, reflect, or redirect, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching your nervous system that safety doesn't come from escape. It comes from presence. And this isn't just about one habit. This is about how you show up for yourself, how you handle discomfort, how you nurture your emotional needs without judgment. Healing doesn't happen when you suppress what you feel. It happens when you honor what you feel and give it a healthier outlet. When Sam learned this, he said something that summed it up perfectly. It's not that I stopped the habit. It's that I stopped being owned by it. You see, freedom doesn't mean you never fall back into old patterns. It means you never forget what they're trying to teach you. So the next time that familiar moment comes, don't run from it. Breathe through it. Listen to it. Because that moment, the one you used to see as weakness, might just be your greatest opportunity for awareness. Real transformation begins the moment you choose understanding over judgment. And that choice, repeated often enough, becomes peace. Healing doesn't come from extremes. It's not found in complete indulgence or complete denial. It lives somewhere in between, in the quiet balance between awareness and acceptance. Some people try to heal by cutting themselves off completely, thinking that suppression equals strength. Others swing the opposite way, giving in whenever the urge arises, mistaking freedom for avoidance. But both paths are rooted in the same wound: a lack of emotional safety. You see, when you don't feel safe within yourself, you'll either try to control everything or surrender to everything. The real healing happens when you no longer need to do either. When you reach that middle ground, the habit stops being a source of guilt and starts becoming a signal. It tells you when you're stressed, when you're disconnected, when you're lonely. You no longer see it as a flaw, but as feedback, and that feedback gives you the power to respond with consciousness instead of compulsion. That's the difference between control and connection. Control says, I can't let this happen. Connection says, I understand why this happens. One resists, the other reflects. And reflection is where growth begins. Sam once described this shift beautifully. He said, I used to feel like I was fighting a war against myself. But now, it feels like I'm finally listening to myself. That's the transformation awareness creates. You stop seeing your inner world as the enemy and start seeing it as your teacher. You begin to realize that every emotion, every urge, every moment of discomfort is your mind trying to communicate something essential. When you listen, you integrate. When you ignore, you isolate psychologically. This is what we call integration, the process of merging your conscious and unconscious parts so that they stop working against each other. The moment you accept both your desire and your discipline as valid parts of you, the inner conflict loses its fire. You no longer need to choose between your body and your mind because they're finally working together. You become whole. And wholeness is what most of us have been seeking all along. Not perfection, not purity, just peace. Think about it. When you stop labeling your impulses as wrong and start understanding them as messages, you take away their power to control you. The habit no longer defines your worth. You stop measuring yourself by how well you suppress your humanity and start valuing yourself by how deeply you understand it. That's when you begin to notice a quiet shift. You're less reactive, more present, and more in tune with your emotional needs. There's something liberating about no longer hiding from yourself. When you stop seeing your inner world as a battlefield, you finally create space for calm. You begin to trust your body again. You start to see that it's not trying to betray you, it's trying to guide you. And once that trust is rebuilt, every impulse becomes an opportunity to practice presence instead of shame. So when that familiar urge appears again, don't rush to silence it or surrender to it. Just notice it, observe it with kindness. Ask yourself, what is this moment trying to teach me? Because the truth is, mastery doesn't come from control. It comes from understanding. And understanding is what transforms a habit into healing. In the end, you don't need to escape your impulses or obey them. You just need to know them. Because the more you know yourself, the less power your patterns hold over you, and the more peace you begin to find within. It's late again. The same room, the same silence, but something feels different this time. You're not moving on impulse anymore. You're aware. You notice the thought before it becomes action. You feel the emotion before it turns into habit. You pause, and for the first time, that pause doesn't feel like resistance, it feels like power. Because awareness isn't just about understanding your mind. It's about reclaiming your freedom. The moment you begin to witness your own patterns without judgment, you stop being trapped by them. You stop living at the mercy of your urges and start living in alignment with your values. Healing doesn't look like perfection. It looks like presence. It's the quiet moment when you choose consciousness over compulsion, when you breathe instead of react, when you allow yourself to feel instead of flee. That's what emotional maturity looks like. Not control, but compassion. You begin to realize that there's nothing wrong with you. There never was. You were simply trying to feel safe in a world that often made you feel alone. Sam once told me something that perfectly captured this transformation. He said, I used to think peace would come when I stopped struggling with my habits. But it came when I stopped struggling with myself. That's the secret most people miss. The real work isn't in fixing the behavior. It's in softening the relationship you have with yourself. When you approach your habits with understanding instead of resistance, you begin to heal the parts of you that needed them in the first place. From a psychological lens, this is what's called self-integration. It's the point where your conscious choices and unconscious needs begin to align. You're no longer living in contradiction. What you want and what you do start to match. That's when inner peace becomes more than an idea, it becomes your natural state. You stop needing constant stimulation to feel alive because you've found stillness within. The silence that once felt uncomfortable now feels sacred. And maybe that's what this entire journey has been about. Not to label your desires as wrong or your impulses as shameful, but to realize they were never your enemies. They were signals. They were the parts of you that were asking to be seen, understood, and loved. Once you stop fighting them, you begin to evolve them. You transform them from compulsions into choices, from shame into self-awareness. So tonight, when the world goes quiet again, I want you to remember this. You are not the same person who started this conversation. You've learned to look deeper. You've learned that what you do in silence says less about your weakness and more about your wounds. And now that you can see those wounds clearly, you have the power to heal them consciously. The next time that urge arises, don't meet it with guilt, meet it with grace. Ask yourself, what is this moment inviting me to learn? Because every moment of awareness, no matter how small, is a step toward peace. You're not defined by your habits. You're defined by your willingness to understand them. And the more you understand yourself, the less you'll need to escape who you are. Healing doesn't mean you stop feeling the urge. It means the urge no longer controls you. Because the greatest act of mastery isn't conquering your desires. It's finding peace within them.